What's up, guys? How's it going? It's Colin Tilley. Welcome to Podcastle episode 3. Super excited today because we're going to dive into another one of my favorite videos, Anderson Paak featuring Kendrick Tints. This video was highly recognized in some incredible ways. It got nominated for Best Editing. Shout out to Vinny Hobbs. It got nominated for Best Cinematography. Shout out to Elias. But I'm going to rewind a little bit and I'm going to go to where it all started. I remember I first got a call from Carrie, Anderson's manager, and she hit me and she was like, hey, what do you think about doing an Anderson video? I was like, dude, I love Anderson. Like, I think that his music's incredible, and I remember the first time I saw him play. Just an all-around incredible musician. So I was like, all right, let's do it. So they sent me this song, and of course it's featuring Kendrick Lamar, who I'd previously done some great work with, and I was just like, I'm all the way in, count me in. So I did the first treatment and everybody was ready to go. We had to shoot in 5 days because it was the main date that Kendrick was available. Everything had pretty much gotten approved, and then I got a call from Dr. Dre. And Dr. Dre was like, yo, what's up, Colin? Good to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. We had already had a previous rapport. He's like, so look, I'm excited you're going to shoot this video and all, but we're not going to do this treatment. I'm like, we're not going to do this treatment? Okay, well... yeah, I mean, we're supposed to shoot in like a couple days now. He's like, well, let's talk about it. Like, why don't you come through to my studio tonight and let's just kind of figure out where we can really go with it. I was like, all right, cool. Say no more. When the doctor calls, you better go. So I skirt over to Dre's house, go to his studio. Him and Anderson are there. And we all got to sit down and have an incredible meeting. And Dre's perspective, there's a reason why they call him the doctor, because he just kind of really started to talk to me and Anderson about the way that this video should be portrayed. He's like, Dre was like, yeah, we should be watching the video and hear the song from there. We shouldn't hear the song and see the video. And I'm like, man, that's such an interesting approach, because most of the time people are like, nah, that doesn't feel like the song. But he really wanted me to push it in a more cinematic direction. He really wanted me to push it in way more of a symbolic direction as far as what it means to have tints on. And so we started to throw around some ideas, and there was some pretty bizarre stuff being thrown around in the room. Anderson had some really great ideas. And I was like, all right, this is enough to get me going. So I literally got back to my house at like 10:30, 11 p.m. And I had no choice but to stay up all night and rewrite this concept, because we were going into production in 3 days. So we started to move forward. Everything was rocking. Everybody loved Anderson hit me the next day and was like, I love the treatment. It's perfect. And we just started prepping the video, assuming that it was going to be all good. I called Dre. He's like, yo, I'm in the gym. I'll hit you back. But I'll read it around 1 p.m. I was like, cool. The whole day passed by, and I go to dinner with all my friends. Of course, the moment I sit down for dinner, Dre calls. He's like, yo, so it's there, but I think we got to keep pushing it. Can we meet up over the weekend? I was like, yo, we shoot on Sunday. That's just not possible. He's like, you know what? I'll move some things around. Like, can you come over right now? I was like, let's do it. So I literally put my card down at the table for all my friends. I'm like, have a good dinner. I'm sorry I have to leave. And I go straight to Dre's. And I gotta say, this was like one of the more memorable experiences like of my career, because I got to sit down with Dre and we just basically broke down the entire treatment. We were acting out scenes together in his living room, and we were just catching a serious vibe, and we really pushed where this needed to go. And it's just one of those things where you can see how much Dre is driven still at this point in his career after all of the things he's accomplished. And this isn't even his video. This is something that he's doing for one of his artists, somebody that he really cares about. And I left that meeting after a couple hours of going through and ironing it out with Dre, just being like, oh my gosh, I'm so inspired by this dude's drive and motivation to keep pushing the limit. So anyways, that's a little bit of backstory behind the video. And I gotta say, there was so many things that I learned from a psychological perspective about being a leader from Dre just through that pre-production process, because I was like, man, he really got me to go that much harder based on him showing his involvement and his passion for this project. Now it was like, if I don't make this fucking good, then I'm not doing my job for the whole picture of everything that Dre puts his name on and stamps his name on it, just from a brand's perspective. So then it was time to meet up with my team. Now that I had an ironed out treatment, I had a playbook, and I was ready to go. So a huge part of this video was the blocking. I wanted to make sure that every single one of these scenes seamlessly transitioned from one moment to the next, but still kept the tonality of the piece. And I wanted to nail a tonality where it was dark, and it had these very shocking visuals, but it could go from a dark comedy to then something that just really hurt to watch, and something that was definitely more in the noir direction, or the dramatic direction, or even the horror direction. So the first person that I met up with was Elias. And Elias is one of the sickest cinematographers out there, somebody I work with all the time. We have a really incredible relationship at this point. And over the last, at this point in 2018, he had shot every one of my videos for the last year and a half. So our language on set is just undeniable. But it's because we sit there and we do all the preparation beforehand. So we're sitting there and we're breaking this shit down from start to finish as far as this video needs to be. And we're talking about our way in to every single one of these scenes and the importance of it. So I'm gonna jump into the video, and I think a lot of things will come up, but I just wanted to kind of talk about this process beforehand because it's so important. So here it goes. The video starts off with this quote from Edgar Allan Poe: "Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see." And this was Vinny's idea, really putting this piece together with Vinny. We worked very close. We spent probably a week in the edit session on this one together. And when he finished, he was like, "Man, I think we should start out with this quote. It'll really help people understand a little bit more of our intention going into this piece."
I thought you said you didn't want to talk about it anymore.
No, that's not what I said. I just don't want to argue about it.
Listen, I really want to live in an unmasked world.
I really love the way it plays out, and like our original, dialogue for this. I worked really closely with Nico and Johnny, my creative producers on the project. And we were really talking through a lot of dialogue. And honestly, just talking through this dialogue for this opening sequence was really just talking about the idea of telling the truth. And, I think a lot of couples can relate to this idea. When we're inside our house, when we're inside of our windows, when we're inside of these closed doors, all of our masks are off. We're in our most vulnerable space. But within this vulnerable space, there's really no lies. There's really no masks that we have around us. We can be ourselves without any judgment. So we thought it was so interesting to be able to play on the idea of, what if this beautiful female and Anderson, we're this couple, and they're talking about the idea, and like they had gotten in this fight, and she can't sleep anymore because they got in this fight. So she's sitting there tossing and turning all night. She walks up, grabs some milk, and she can just feel Anderson behind her back. And they start having this conversation about, why can't we just live in an unmasked world? Why can't we tell the truth every day beyond our confines of our own households?
I really want to live in an unmasked world.
So this opening shot right here, where it pushes into Anderson's eye for the first time, was always something that we wanted to do, and I had so much fun blocking this shot out with Elias, and we had to use certain diopters and be able to get our depth and our focus to be able to focus on something that was wider, and then obviously end on a close focus. Those are really hard, precise shots to get. The first shot that we see in the edit is a foreshadow of Anderson with 3 bullet holes and a puddle of blood underneath him. And this was actually a shot that I thought of on the day of. This was never in the storyboards. This was never in our shot list. This was never in the treatment, because we were already doing all these makeup gags for the blood and him getting stuffed inside the trunk by the old people. I was like, well, you know what? Like, we're going to be in the middle of the street. Let's do a really shocking visual with tape over his mouth and him just standing there in the middle of the street. And it was one shot. But this actually ended up being one of my favorite shots in the piece because it was a freestyle. It was such just a feeling from your gut where you're like, we got to do this. And as you can see, all it is one bigger source just raked into the street. And that's how we created the shot. Greg was on Steadicam. He killed this shot. And we started out super, super wide and then went all the way into his face. And I thought it was such an impactful moment for this piece. And the fact that we ended up using it for a foreshadow in the edit ended up just being really cool, and I think very, very abstract in a sense. The idea of the video was always to start off with Anderson in the back of a trunk. And this was actually one of Anderson's first ideas that he threw out in that initial meeting. He was like, dude, what if I'm in the back of a trunk and I have tape over my mouth and I'm like, I'm feeling kind of cooped up. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I've been feeling kind of cooped up. I'm trying to get some fresh air. Hey, so then we built on top of that and had this idea. There was these old people in a car that looked, innocent to the police officer, but really they've got Anderson tied up, stabbed up, tape over his mouth in the back of their trunk, and, this police officer has no clue. I mean, he even, and it's even more funny because he puts his flashlight on the back of the back seat. There's a rifle back there with a Confederate flag, like National Rifle Association. He holds up this his National Rifle Association badge, like he's like, oh, sorry man, this is what I got. And then the idea of showing that it was a corrupt police officer too. What goes on beyond his tints. What are behind his windows. So then that takes us into our next scene, and I like the way we basically found a location, which was the Pink Motel. Now we've all seen the Pink Motel 1,000,002 times. But this was the location that I had locked in for the previous video concept to create all of these different little mini scenes and mini movies within one big piece. Really, this location was a huge benefit for us. So then obviously the transition here is the old people and the cop car pulling off after they're pulled over, and then we go to this nice old diner. So here Anderson gets to play a really fun character. Anderson is a great dancer, an incredible actor. He's just like a really funny guy. He's got great comedy beats and comedy chops. So he plays this kind of young character that's closing up for the day. He works at this diner, and you see him start to close down the cash registers and subtly taking money as if he doesn't know anybody's watching. And just the idea of it's really fun. He got to mop the floor and do his nice dancing moves throughout the piece. And just the whole idea of it was to bring a little bit more fun and life to this piece so that we get a little bit of dancing. We get this kind of young, innocent character that is stealing money from the cash register. It's pretty behind closed doors. And then he looks over and he realizes that all of the shades weren't closed. And, so it's just fun to be able to play off that. So then we go into this other really interesting scene that I just always had in my head for this. But it's the idea that there was these guys trying to make a hit out. And we see all of them dead on the ground. We push through the door and we see Anderson washing off the blood off his hands really fast. And it's just to capture the idea of more of a manic character. You can, play this harder character out in the streets, but then you go inside and you're crying about it and you're singing with your little puppy dog. He's crying. So then this pushes into these waves on a TV. Boom. We've got this iconic shot of Kendrick. And here I really wanted to have a transition going through the TV. But I wanted to do it in a different way. So I asked my art department to grab the inside, the framing of an actual TV so that on a wider lens we could push through that TV to introduce Kendrick for the first time. And I just love the juxtaposition of Kendrick in a bathrobe, kind of playing this character on an oxygen tank, but yet he's got the Grim Reaper in the background. So it's like there's a lot of imagery there that I think the audience can connect to. There's symbolisms in there that are going to make you think different and that are going to get your mind and imagination going. And that's my big thing with pieces like this, is to really continue to push that and to continue to have it elevated throughout the piece. So again, Kendrick, oxygen tank, bathrobe, weird apartment with all these fish tanks, and of course there's the Grim Reaper in the back. So even the fucking Grim Reaper can't touch Kendrick, even though he's on an oxygen tank. And I really wanted him to play this kind of like monotone character, so it was really fun to see that. I had him do it a couple different ways. I had him perform kind of a little bit more hyped up and elevated, but I really saw that what was working for this specific character is to do something that felt understated, that felt monotone, that felt like it could be more of like an older version of Kendrick, even though he's not old, but just something that felt like a little bit more like he's in a trance. And so then there's this beautiful shot right here that I love, where we got on like an 8mm rectilinear and went above him and had him fall asleep in our frame. And it was just such a great transition point for us to take us into the next scene.
So 100 down on the passenger. Bitch, I'm Kendrick Lamar. Respect me from afar.
Bitch, I'm Kendrick Lamar. This is the first time we introduced the Peep Show. And this is actually where the whole concept originated, because it was part of our conversation that Dre and Anderson and I were having. What are these girls dancing doing behind the curtains of the Peep Show? Like, what is that like? I mean, they come out for a couple minutes, but then what's happening behind those curtains? Somehow during that conversation, the idea of having them on their cell phones while they're dancing behind the curtains would be like the funniest thing. And so this was a great way to be able to create that. So we built this set in the parking lot there, and it was a very complex set to build within the time that we did. But it was so much fun to be able to create these camera moves where we could go from Anderson sitting on one side and Kendrick sitting on the other, and then being able to transition over. But then we also had double-sided mirrors. And those double-sided mirrors, we were able to play a lot with reflection and being able to see them. So it was a very complex set to shoot, but we were able to get a lot accomplished within that environment.
I need 10, cause my head is non-disclosure. I need 10, so I can live with a peace of mind without niggas taking a piece of mind and peace.
So this is like obviously another iconic scene, and this was a really fun shot to coordinate. But basically it's Dr. Dre, his wife, Kendrick, all at a stop sign, while Anderson Paak is literally driving a lift car doing donuts in the middle of the street. And the idea was I wanted to be able to do this shot where it felt like it was an overhead shot over the car doing donuts, pushed in through the tinted windows of Dre's car, all the way through the back seats of his car, all the way through the back seats of Kendrick's car. We're like, how the fuck do we do this? So Elias spent so much time with Jimmy, our lead grip Kung Fu, to figure out how to, make this shot happen. So essentially what they had to do, and this is pretty crazy, I'm not going to give too much away because I know doing shots like that's crazy, and a lot of people have asked Elias how the fuck he did it. But essentially they created a rig that, and Vinny and I worked hard on making sure the transition here went from the techno crane and then pushed through perfectly to the next part of our shot, which was through the back seats of Dr. Dre and his wife and Kendrick. But essentially they created a rig where we were able to slide the camera all the way across from between two cars. And that was fucking crazy. When we accomplished it, it felt really good. And yeah, it's Dr. Dre in there. It's fucking awesome. So this shot of Anderson in the actual lift, it's funny because it's Anderson Paak driving the lift car with a couple scared as hell in the back seat. I thought this cut worked really well, but we actually did this shot Poor Man's Process. So Poor Man's Process, for those of you that don't know, is essentially when you fake like you're driving even though you're not driving. So we used a lot of smoke and glitter and camera shakes and the way that Elias had the camera pushing in, like all of those things together, and people on the back of the car shaking it, worked really well in order to accomplish this and get a great shot while staying safe. And also with the amount of time that we had, it worked really well to our efficiency. So another fun scene here. This is a mother tucking her little kid in on one side of the wall, and she walks into the other side and Anderson's tied up on the bed for some S&M, and she just takes that robe off and she's a completely different person. So just a more fun and comedic take on the idea of tints and what's behind those walls or what's behind those shades. And like who knows, like a lot of who knows what your parents are doing on the other side of that wall. And this was just a really fun way to show that and to put a fun lens on it. Didn't have a transition where we were necessarily going in and out of something. I didn't want to do that every time. So sometimes just a simple camera whip off was the perfect transition into our next camera whip in. And so that camera whip off goes into, now it's this girl saying goodnight to her dad who Anderson plays. And then all of a sudden, little do we know, she turns on her webcam and she's doing webcams, while her dad's in the other room reading the Bible. So then we have this weird doctor's office scene. So I thought it would be so interesting if Anderson plays this other character where he's, a doctor or something like that, and this character is the one that happens to be watching those live webcams that the daughter was doing in the other scene. And the fact that he played this character with kind of a blank stare made it all even a little bit more creepy. And so again, the whole point of this is to make you feel every type of way while watching this piece, and this shot right here just kind of did it, and the timing of it worked out really well. So another one, this is a great example here too. I had Anderson play this kind of like painter coming home from work. You could tell his life is pretty monotonous, and he's just kind of like had it. He's chain smoking cigarettes, but the second he goes behind that door, the only thing that he has that kind of keeps him alive is his drum set. And if you guys don't know, Anderson's like an incredible drummer, and I had to make sure we showcased that in this piece. So we actually filled those drums with so much baby powder. It was like insane. Baby powder was all over our set. Locations were not happy. And he was just going at it, and it was awesome. And again, like this isn't necessarily going too deep into the idea of what's behind these tints, but it's important for me to also just have things that are really visual and still get the point across, but they don't necessarily have to be the deepest thing in the world. It should be for entertainment purposes as well, and that's definitely, I think what this does. So this is super funny because you see the girl on the webcam like going super ham. I had her like literally, I was like, can you jump up and do the splits on the bed? She's like, yeah, why not? And so she did that, and then we transitioned off from the exterior of the windows to then dolling over to the dad Anderson reading his Bible, and his cross falls off the wall. So again, really weird. So I love this shot right here. This was like, I had this idea where I wanted to create this big banquet hall of this businessman after hours. So during regular hours, he's a straight businessman, 9 to 5, blue collar, goes and works, at his corporation. And, just very straight edge. But then the second that 5 o'clock hits, he snaps and he spends his money in very weird ways. So here he has maids come that, end up stripping for him, and he has a little too much fun with. And he's doing cocaine, he's doing drugs. It's all the dark sides of what happens behind those tints after hours. And there's a lot of people, when you're walking down the street, I always wonder, I'm like, what the fuck does he do after hours? What the fuck does he do behind closed doors? You don't know. And this scene was so much fun to do. The girls were so, helpful to make this scene happen, because it did take a lot of vulnerability from both ends. And the fact that they were, they wanted to make the scene fun, so they were, down to go a little bit further as far as just the imagery that we were capturing. And Anderson was, super graceful with it as well. And the scene just looks nuts. It feels something out of like Wolf of Wall Street or something. So that's kind of what I was trying to capture. I was definitely inspired by that plane scene. When he was going like this, one of the girls, I asked her to pour water from one of the jugs or whatever, and she started pouring water, and he like started choking. Like, it was so, things got like super out of pocket on that scene. So This scene right here means everything to me because this kind of really wraps the whole piece up, and it's not comedy, obviously, and it's a guy in an AA meeting, and he's actually the one that's leading it. And you see everybody file out the doors, and then all of a sudden we cut to this really dark image, and he's actually shooting up. And so, it's not funny, it's real. And it was really important for me to end this piece on a serious note to really get that point across. So yeah, that outro shot really, I feel like kind of makes you settle with the piece. And, I like, even right now I feel weird watching it because I just went through a series of emotions. And that was really what I wanted to be able to do, is make people feel something when watching this piece. And you can laugh, you can be entertained, you can be curious. But then at the end, it does get dark and it makes you think. You're like, wow. It makes you think about your own life. And I think that's super important. I want to make pieces that relate back to people and that, you can relate to personal experiences. And, I think that's what filmmaking is all about. We should never take that for granted that, as filmmakers, we have a platform to make people think and to make people laugh and to make people entertained. And that's what this piece does. So, super happy with it. When we finished this piece, sending the edit to everybody, I remember the reaction was exactly what I wanted, and everybody was very happy. And it was it's a different video. It's a different format video. It's not your typical music video. It feels more like a strange short film, and that was the goal for it. And the fact that it did get recognition after the piece was over, I felt so happy because the people that worked on this video worked so hard to make this dream come true, and it felt great to see them get the recognition for that. And that's important for me as a leader, is to be able to see my team elevate, and that's what this shit's all about. So at the end here, the outro, Anderson says,
"Yeah, you know what? I don't think you're ready for that type of honesty."
Obviously reflecting off everything that he just saw in his imagination, the characters he was playing, the emotions he went through. And then it's funny because the shot that I actually shot that was amazing was then it cuts out to this wide and he's walking away and he's butt naked and you see him walking away. But we couldn't put it in. It just didn't feel right. But that was essentially what he was saying. He's like, I don't think you're ready for this type of honesty. You want to see that? That's what this honesty is. And so that kind of put a nice little ending cap on it all. So thanks for tuning in. That's Boy in the Castle, episode 3, Podcastle.